Chapter 9, Offering Lenders the Chance to Finance Your Dream Team. Borrowing money from a bank is like having sex. You both want it, but they need reassurance of your intentions and foreplay. No matter what business or profession you happen to be in, there are processes and procedures you do so often that you regard as so basic, you take it for granted everyone knows how to do them. If you were to ask a master carpenter how to drive a 3-inch nail through a board, he'd look at you funny and say, "You just do it." I feel the same way about raising capital. I would almost sleepwalk into a bank and walk out with several $1,000,000. It is so basic to what I do that I didn't realize it was a secret. I conduct Quantum Leap Advantage seminars at my home, Guthrie Castle, Scotland. This extraordinary week-long castle experience for business owners and entrepreneurs at my storybook home is beyond compare. At the conclusion of every seminar, I ask attendees to complete critique sheets and to offer suggestions with regard to seminar content, delivery, and overall value. In reviewing these critique sheets, I realized that a significant number of the respondents were asking, in one way or another, the same question: how do I get the money? I was astounded. I assumed that when seminar attendees began thinking like high-performance individuals and applied strategies of high performers, they would instinctively know how to find and secure the capital they needed to take action. Author's note: in recent years, I have started doing podcasts, and I have many on my site free, and one of them is called "How Do You Get the Fucking Money?" End author's note. Two simple facts emerge from these critiques. First, most potentially super successful people are still held back by a residue of fear about asking for money. They still approach even the idea of talking to a lender with a trembling lip, sweaty palms, and pounding heart. If the idea of walking into a banker's office strikes mortal fear in you, let's put this in perspective right now and move on. Not long ago, a news article called "What Kills Us" listed the statistics for the most frequent causes of death. Heart disease is the number one killer, followed by cancer, then stroke, and lung disease. But not one death has ever been attributed to rejection by a banker, or indeed the rejection of any deal. Presenting a deal is not Sophie's choice, so get over it. The second fact I learned was that the techniques of dealing successfully with bankers remain a mystery. Even some of the fieriest proteges were hesitating before the barricades of uncertainty, artificial barriers I had trampled to splinters so long ago I'd forgotten about it. As a result of these revelations, I developed a new seminar in 1995 called the QLA Raising Capital Program, dealing exclusively with finding and securing capital. It focuses on the step-by-step details and techniques of this apparently mystical and forbidding process. We even do role-playing, often with myself cast or miscast as the doofus banker. This chapter and next briefly surmise the content of this seminar. But if you're serious about giving lenders the opportunity to lend you some of the cash they're sitting on, I urgently recommend you attend this 10-hour exponentially explosion of information. Of course, you can also buy the CD. My standing guarantee to attendees is that if you stop their moaning, get into gear and follow the methodology, and don't get their capital funding in 1 year, I'll refund the seminar tuition, period. Author's note: while that was true when I wrote the second edition of the book, the basics of getting money are still the same, very easy. But since then, I have on my website, courtesy of Dan Loke, the Raising Capital Seminar from 1995-1996, where you can get the seminar, but where it outlines in detail. End of author's note. Capital finance is quantum leaps, not pussyfooting. As you'll recall, the two primary jobs of the CEO are to find money, other people's money, and to find deals. If you're the owner of or CEO of your company, you should leave operations, marketing, administration, and group insurance to the competent people you hired, and spend 95% of your time kissing frogs. And if you don't have any employed yet, find people to handle these tasks as quickly as you can. And why do you want people, money, and deals? Because unless you're selling drugs, there's no way you can grow internally faster than you can externally. There just isn't. Forget new sales territories, forget new products, forget cutting costs. All you'll achieve from these piddly efforts is humdrum arithmetic growth, widget sales up 7%, 13% less spent on paper clips. Who cares? You want to grow your business exponentially in quantum leaps as fast as humanly possible. While arithmetic growth means 1 plus 1 equals 2, 2 plus 1 equals 3, etc., exponential growth means 1 times 10 equals 10, 10 times 10 equals 100, 10 times 100 equals 1,000. Isn't that a little more exciting? There's an old Chinese proverb, you don't leap a chasm in 2 bounds. For high-performance business people, that translates to you don't pussyfoot yourself to quantum growth. After you've practiced for success, flushed conventional wisdom, visualized your dream, and incorporated new rules, and started running toward the chasm between you and quantum success, you're probably going to need more money than you've got to finance your leap. Besides, not even the most obliging banker is likely to lend you money just to get your feet wet. Your wholehearted, enthusiastic commitment is as important to him as it is to you. He wants to be assured you're going to use your loan to create revenue, so both of you benefit from the transaction. Locating your financial partner. No matter where you live, you have a choice of financial institutions to consider when you begin thinking about borrowing capital. Banks, savings and loans, venture capitalists, finance companies, and other sources. Since banks fund about 60% of the business ventures, we'll discuss banks first. You'll recall I said that quantum leap strategies can be universally applied. The fact is, many of my capital raising skills were developed in the United Kingdom, then perfected in the U.S. I know British lending institutions better than most Brits. That's why I remind my British audiences how many banking offices there are in the UK to approach for capital. China's HSBC alone has some 1,800 offices throughout the United Kingdom, approximately as many as Barclays and more than Standard Chartered Bank. Lloyds Trustee Savings Bank, who took over HBOS, Halifax Bank of Scotland, already had more than 2,000 offices if you're in the UK. Don't tell me you can't find a bank to pitch. Author's note, since this writing of the second edition, there have been additional foreign banks that have moved to the UK. There's also been additional consolidations, but there are still in London alone, London proper, over 400 banks. End of author's note. Wherever you are, look in the phone book, read the business section of your newspaper. A lot of major metropolitan newspapers publish quarterly a list of banks which are looking for borrowers. Call the business desk of your newspaper and secure a copy of the most recent edition at report. Ranging further afield, such magazines as Entrepreneur and Inc. periodically publish a state-by-state list of financial institutions that seek to publicize their desire to lend capital. So you shouldn't necessarily limit your search for financing to your local market or even your state. In fact, I would strongly recommend you go outside your local market, no matter where you are. Of course, those banks aggressively using traditional advertising have money to get on the street. Those banks advertising on the internet also have money to lend. Author's note, since the publishing of the second edition of this book and the advent of a more detail-oriented internet-based platforms like Google, it is relatively easy to find financial institutions of all sorts. End of author's note. In seminar after seminar, I have the latest special newspaper section of magazine edition with all these listings in the air, and ask to see the hands of those business owners and entrepreneurs who have used any of the publications to seek capital. I get maybe one hand or no hands. It's like these listings were published on Mars. I raise hell with the audience and tell them that even today, I get an active file on banking news and regularly appears in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Financial Times of London, and other major publications. If they are serious about finding capital, they should pay attention to the wealth of information that institutions are disseminating, and so should you. So, using all resources available, make a list of banks, which begins with the first mega bank headquartered in the tallest skyscraper in your state and ends with a community corner bank down to the strip mall by the tattoo parlor. Then you do some homework to find out who the managers are of your most likely prospects and who the lending officers are. Go down the list, call each bank and ask. The names of these bank officers are not a state secret. Stop by and ask the reception or even the security guard. What financial institutions are most likely to lend you the money you need? At the top of the list are any new open branch offices. Why? New banks have no customers. They are stacked to the ceiling with money you need to shovel out the door in order to begin generating income. And they're run by a shiny new manager who has a desperate need to prove himself by generating loans. Consider this actual promotion recently written for a new bank in Florida. Midstate Bank of Florida is now open at the corner of Robinson Street and Magnolia Avenue to handle all your personal and business banking. At the MBF, our style of community banking is based on building personal relationships with our customers. We get to know the needs of your business so we can provide the best mix of financial services, adopting them to meet your specific business requirements. When you need a loan or a line of credit, relationship banking means approvals come quickly from the local management people who already know you. This bank is really saying, please give us a chance to lend you money. In the words of finance, we call this bank a laydown. They should have their grand opening in the vault, hand out shovels. If I were shopping for capital in Florida, I'll be at this bank like a lion on a fleeing wildebeest. Author's note, it is even more blatant than this now, as I describe podcast and various pages free again on my website. The internet makes it almost a slam dunk to find capital for your new business. As I say, and as I've said since 1995, somewhere out there is a bank, a doofus banker, that will fund your dream. End of author's note. I recently read where two women banking executives joined together to open their own bank. If I were a woman trying to secure funding for my dream, I'd be on the phone to them in a heartbeat. And that's not a sexist observation. Who can deny that, all other factors being equal, a strong chemistry pre-exists between the founders of a bank and any female entrepreneur? In the early years, Michael Plazriak was a Dutch radio personality, a career he had dreamed of since childhood. But then in 1998, he quit while he was casting about for his next career. His good friend, Colin, met me at a seminar. The two of them signed up for the Castle seminar, but when time came, I was too sick to play host to a crowd of eager faces, so I canceled. But Michael and Colin would not be canceled. They showed up at Guthrie dressed to the nines and ready to become immersed in the deep waters of QLA. What an incredible experience, said Michael. For 3 days, day and night, we had our own private Castle seminar. We learned step by step how to start our business. We learned the importance of staying focused. You can't hit two goals with one ball. And most important, to just do it, no fear. Michael told us how lack of fear and total confidence worked wonders when he went looking for money, when he went out offering lenders a chance to finance his dream. Moved by the conviction that anything I wanted to achieve was possible, Michael said, I went to the bank. I had great story and the ability to convince potential lenders of how successful my project was bound to be. I got my first $500,000 guilders in a week. I made up a business plan and found a partner and an investor. I continued to pull funds together, and in 2001 signed a contract with a private equity partner for 70 million guilders. And this happened within a year after I left Guthrie. And at the time, we were just 6 people working in a huge empty building. Within a year, we bought several TV production companies, had grown to more than 150 employees, and were enjoying a turnover of more than 20 million guilders. It often happens that officers brought into a corporation to have different management styles and goals than the founding entrepreneur and outnumber that individual into forced departure. The day after I was given the opportunity to leave, I started my next venture. 7 years later, we sold the company to a major publisher for $7 million. Throughout these experiences, Dan's lessons kept coming back to me. Dream big and just do it. Author's note, Michael has subsequently come back to the seminar again. A few years later, I believe it was 2010, and has gone back, and after getting wealthy in his publishing business, decided he wanted to give back to the world, and he is doing seminars around the world based on his experience in QLA. End of author's note. For lending purposes, there are basically 2 types of banks: centralized loan institutions and branch bank institutions. The centralized bank pools its loan requests for several branches, and this bundle of requests is forwarded up to people who never heard of you. Your deal will be weighed objectively in competition with all other requests, and regardless of its merits as a splendid opportunity, it's likely to get lost among more promising deals backed with a stronger collateral and other advantages. Instead, you want to approach a branch bank institution with local lending approval power. Like Midstate Bank in Florida, this is likely to be a community bank or a hometown bank run by neighbors in the banking business. Loan committee is comprised of your individual banker, who becomes your advocate, and 3 or 4 other bank officials, directors or community business people, and golf foursomes to whom bankers looked for guidance. Suppose you've picked 5 banks, which are possibilities. Which banks do you try first? The one that least likely to provide you financing? That's because you need to practice your presentation skills both on the phone and face-to-face meetings. Make all your mistakes, expend all your butterflies before you get to the serious prospects. What's your first point of contact? If you've recruited your dream team, I recommend you have your accountant or your lawyer make the first call on your behalf. Either one of these individuals is likely to have more clout with the banker than you. In fact, the banker will take the call of your lawyer and accountant long before he'll take and return your call. An intercessory call made on your behalf suggests you are a significant or at least a knowledgeable player in the local business community. Remember, perception is reality. Your accountant, hopefully a prominent CPA or chartered accountant in the UK association with a respected and even a Big Four firm, calls the banker and says, as Joe Jones accounting firm, we've recommended that his company consider your bank to establish a business relationship. They're in the so-and-so industry. Do you foresee any conflicts? Of course not. Good. I'll have him call you and set up a meeting. But suppose you're still selecting your dream team and have to make the first call yourself. Of course you shouldn't. No problem. You start with the manager, but you may be passed to the vice president of lending. Most likely, however, you may find that Mr. J. Fred Banker is not available, and some assistant will take your number. Do not sit by the phone and wait for him to return your call. Like most bankers, he is a very busy individual, being phoned constantly by people he already knows who are more important than you, a total stranger. Call him back again and again. If he has a voicemail, saturate the system with your patient professional messages. If I find out he has no time called indicator, I'll call 13 times in 10 minutes. Finally, Fred Banker will realize, this guy's persistent, and he's going to screw up my voicemail if I don't call him back. So he calls. So introduce yourself graciously, thank him for returning your call, and begin the same basic opening routine. I'm in the so-and-so industry, and you're experiencing rapid growth with opportunities in several directions. I'm looking to establish a financial relationship for my business, and I'm in the process of interviewing several banks which have been recommended. But rather than go into details over the phone, I'd like to set up an appointment to meet and talk personally. When would be the best time for me to come by? Author's note. Since writing this, and for the second edition, kids, and I call you all kids because I'm old enough to be your father or grandfather, have perfected this system through LinkedIn and have actually gotten entire dream teams on the phone, including accountants and lawyers, and even the initial relationships with banks. It's a new generation, and the internet can't be overlooked. End of author's note. Notice you didn't say, I need to borrow some money and need it by next Thursday. Bankers, you see, are very much into relationship banking. They want to know who you are, see your face, and understand what the hell you do, and begin forming a judgment as to whether you'll be able to pay back any capital they may ultimately lend you. Personal chemistry, not the numbers, is absolutely key, both for you and J. Fred Banker. By the way, it's part of your strategy that you inform Fred you're interviewing banks. This puts him on notice that as far as you are concerned, you're the one doing the selecting. You're in control of hiring a bank. Maybe his to handle your affairs. It also tells him you're talking to his competitors, and if you are a significant account for him, he's going to have to earn it. Doesn't that approach beat the hell out of how you always thought it would be, crawling on your knees to grovel for a loan? So, in order to begin developing your mutually beneficial relationship, you might suggest lunch. Bankers always pick up the tab. It's part of their training. I've been dealing with bankers for over 35 years, and I've never had to buy a banker lunch except in Scotland. It's even better if you can arrange for one banker to see you having lunch with another banker. Author's note. I've now been dealing with banks more than 45 years, and the picking up tabs by bankers are still in force, but it's hard to get a Scottish banker to pick up the tab for anything. End of author's note. Your first meeting is to get acquainted, for each of you to see what the other looks like and sounds like, so the bonding process between you can, you hope, begin. Your initial presentation of your project should still be general and last no more than 5 to 10 minutes. You also have 2 other things to do during that meeting. Listen and ask questions. As you discuss your ideas, give the banker a chance to react to what you're presenting him. After all, he had a lot of dreams come over his desk, some dissolving into smoke, others becoming realities. This guy can probably offer some suggestions and ideas you can incorporate into your thinking, help you sharpen your focus, and even give a better presentation to the next banker you talk to. His advice is free and it's based on experience, so listen to him. Most wannabe borrowers sit in the front of a banker with no idea of what to ask beyond, can you help me? They don't understand that they should be in the interview mode, asking questions to clarify just what this bank is all about and if it's the best bank to fund your project. In Britain, that means you got to know the difference between, say, the Royal Bank of Scotland Group and Lloyd's TSB. Let's talk about some questions you need to ask each other with whom you have a meeting and why each question is important. 1, what is your personal lending limit? Secured and unsecured. Every bank manager and loan officer has a credit limit that he or she can approve without having to check with a superior. Ask this question on the phone before your first meeting. You may be talking to the wrong person. And don't let them hedge around with relationship double talk. Bullshit. Specific number. If they tell you it's $50,000, you're going to probably need about $48,000. If it's $400,000, your requirement will coincidentally be about $350,000. But if you determine that this person does not have the authority to approve as much as you may need, move beyond him immediately. Number two, who do I have to go to for an approval on the next level of financing? When Fred tells you who the official is at the next approval level, that's the person you want to meet. Don't waste your time making presentations to the wrong people. While you're asking about lending limits, inquire about the credit limits of the bank itself. When you ask a banker about his employer's unsecured credit limit, usually 1% of assets, he begins to think that you're in terms of maximums. Number three, are you a centralized loan institution that pools the loan requests or a branch-based lender? We've already said you're looking for a branch-based lender and why. Number four, is your bank presently in a lending mode or in a downsizing mode? This is a code for have you made some bad loans in the recent past to the extent that the government is watching your lending practices very closely. It's not classified information, and your banker will respect you for knowing to ask the question. If he says something like, well, we're in a holding process right now, that's his coded response for, we're in a death spiral right now. Do you have any openings for a former banker? Before you escape, you may want to buy his lunch. 5. What type of ventures do you like to make loans on? Some institutions focus on telecommunications, others on healthcare or international trade. If you're reopening, purchasing, or expanding a chain of hardware stores, for example, you want a bank which had a comfortable lending record to retail ventures. If you're in the retail liquor business or want to expand your chain of gentlemen clubs, you need to be aware that some banks, as a matter of policy, try to avoid vice industries. The thought of a $20 million deposit, however, might change that policy. 6. What was the last deal your bank turned down and why? Another unexpected question, but get your banker to tell you about the deal, even hypothetically, as he relates to you a case of what he was not looking for. You gain a new insight into what he is looking for in a lending relationship. 7. What was the last $5 million deal you did? You might not ask this question to a VP at UBS, Bank of America, or Barclays, but for some likely lenders in your community, this is a significant question. You're asking your banker, in effect, to demonstrate his comfort level and skills at maneuvering both of you through the multi-million-dollar lending process. 8. Can your institution take me to the next level of the quantum leap? How much are their assets? Once again, as a rule of thumb, banks can lend 1% of total assets unsecured and 2% to 3% of total assets secured. Author's note, these numbers may have changed, but they are good for a general rule. End of author's note. Number 9, what is your bank's policy on asset lending versus cash flow lending? By now, Fred Banker is sitting up in his chair regarding you with a degree of awe. You're already sounding more sophisticated than 95% of the morons he talks to about loans. In asset lending, the loan limit is determined by the loan-to-value of asset. Take 50% as an example. If you've got approximately $100,000 in tangible assets, the bank will lend you $50,000. Many banks these days steer clear of asset lending because of the past loan defaults have forced them to become reluctant property owners. You should look for an asset-based collateralization loan, since most banks will bend over backwards to work with you in a pinch rather than take possession of your chain of dry cleaners or pet stores. Cash flow lending, a basis lending parameters on percentages of existing cash flow revenues, less operational expenses, cash costs, and taxes, typically between 50 and 65% of cash flow without smoke and mirrors. If you're already producing income, many bankers prefer this basis because they can get their hands on income without hassling property ownership or attempting to realize tangible assets. If you're just starting, show them how much income your project generates so that they consider giving you the loan based on future cash flow. 10. Are you an interstate bank or do you operate just within the state? I'm talking U.S. banks, of course. You'll already know the answer to this one by the time you and Fred Banker sit down. You will prefer an intrastate bank since it's simpler to deal with an institution which operates in only one state. Besides, interstate banks are subject to more federal and red tape and regulations. But again, you'll bank with whomever has the funds and buys your dream. 11. Could you give me some recent examples of companies for which your bank has approved business loans? Come on, Dan. Isn't that a little presumptuous? Asking the banker who he's lending money to? Damn right. So what? You're interviewing banks, and what do you ask for during the interview? References, of course. They're going to check yours, so check theirs. You're not necessarily asking dollar amounts and terms, just who. I will ask about amounts. In fact, I'll keep asking questions as long as they keep giving me answers. If your banker is eager enough to lend money, he may actually give you a list of recent lending approvals. But even if he mumbles some crap about confidentiality or bank policy, the questions keep him sitting up straight, and it reminds him who's running the meeting. You. 12. Do you anticipate any conflict with your present clientele in handling my banking business? This is an incidental question that signals to the banker your sensitivity to one of his possible concerns. Chances are slim of a conflict of interest, but it's better to have that question and his answer addressed and acknowledged. Suppose you establish a working chemistry with an individual banker. You meet for lunch periodically, you play golf, you mature the relationship for months or years, and then he takes a position with another bank. Do you stay with the original bank? No. The spirit and substance of the relationship is with the individual, not the bank. The bank is nothing more than a mechanism for getting the capital your banker arranges because he's comfortable with you. Unless there are unanswered questions about the move, always go with the banker instead of the bank. Otherwise, you're back to square one at your present bank. Author's note. The only caveat to that I would add is if he moves banks down, not at least laterally or up, you stay with him. End of author's note. Finally, under the area of choosing a bank, don't overlook the option of spending your capital requirement out over 2 or even 3 banks. We'll talk more about that later.